You might not be familiar with Penske Media Corporation, but if you watch the Golden Globes or if you pay attention to outlets like Rolling Stone, Billboard, The Hollywood Reporter, like those are just some of the assets that PMC has acquired over the last 10 years or so. And that has a lot of people in the industry worried. Teri, Hart is here. Jarrod, Jenkins is here. They got a lot to say about this. Welcome to Commotion, y'all.
Hey there.
Hey, I'm so glad y'all are here for this. Teri, I mean, what should people know about the Penske Media Corporation?
Well, there's a lot to know. Jay Penske is our chairman and CEO, and his dad is a billionaire. Like, there's just so much money, it's crazy. And so Jay comes onto the entertainment scene in 2009, buying his first publication, which is Deadline, which is kind of like a scrappy counterculture entertainment magazine back in the day. And since then, he bought up Variety and Hollywood Reporter, which that means he has the triumvirate of the big three entertainment publications. Since then, he also now owns Women's Wear Daily, Rolling Stone, Billboard, Vibe, IndieWire, and there's more. But you kind of get the picture of just all of these brands that I'm naming, of the kind of monopoly that we're dealing with here. And that's not completely unique. But then add on to that the fact that he owns Dick Clark Productions. That production company owns the Golden Globes, the Country, American, and Billboard Music Awards. They also own Times Square New Year's Eve every year. Yeah. It's a staple. And so add all those things together, Rad, and I think you have a juggernaut of entertainment journalism, awards, and money. All caps money. So the reason the money comes in is because for award season, studios and streamers spend millions of dollars in 4-year consideration ads in those publications that I just mentioned.
And just to clarify, 4-year consideration ads are specifically ads targeting awards voters like ourselves, like Oscar voters, and yeah, all that industry.
Yeah. So they're industry publications. The industry reads them. That's who they're wanting to attract. And the same company owns the publication as one of the actual award shows. Oh, and then add into this, I mean, there's another factor here that the company that compiles the data for those music charts for all those music magazines and provides industry insights. So they do those reports on industry comings and goings and stuff. It's called Illuminati. They're also owned by Penske. So it's a really smooth pipeline of coverage, whether it be pro or con, to consumer awareness, and then awards glory or not, and also the industry analysis part. So it is bananas how much Penske owns.
Yeah. I mean, it's not quite a monopoly on entertainment reporting, but it's certainly a monopoly on industry reporting and specifically over those outlets that control that sell 4-year consideration ads for the very kind of awards like the Golden Globes that Penske also owns. So it is a full circle in terms of what they control. And Teri, we should say, look, media companies buying up other media companies. I mean, this is nothing new. I mean, we are, of course, in the midst of this Netflix acquisition of Warner Brothers Discovery. And of course, there's Skydance taking over Paramount Global. And of course, Skydance also making these competing bids to take over Warner Brothers Discovery. And that's raising all sorts of other red flags. But so, I mean, is what makes the Penske media growing, like the media empire, this growing empire, noteworthy? Is it mainly that the kind of control over award season that they are exerting?
Kind of. It's one thing to have a monopoly on content, but it's another thing to entirely own the ecosystem of pop culture. And that's what they're doing. They have gobbled up an ecosystem. You know, those publications that we mentioned, we kind of hinted at it, Rad, they're essentially B2B, business to business publications. They report on the business, they talk to each other, they run reviews on the pulse of what's important, and they're using a Penske company for data and insights and analysis. And then studios have to pay Penske for the publications for awards consideration. It is really, really insidious. They're a monolith is what they are, an absolute monolith. And unless people know about this, All of these businesses operate under their own name. So you would never know that Penske actually owns all of these things. It's not like the Fox brand or the Netflix brand. Somehow this all feels more insidious.
And just to add another example to that, like so last year, Penske, they would sell variety for your consideration packages on top of events where they would say, we will deliver Golden Globe voters to these events, right? So that's how insidious it gets. Jarrod, I mean, look, you've actually been getting a lot of traction for the way that you covered this specifically on social media. You posted a video. In fact, I saw your video. The first time I saw your video a couple of weeks ago, it's because of a cousin of mine who sent it to me. A cousin who does not pay attention to the entertainment industry sent this to me like, did you know this? Right? And I'm like, that's just, I think, a great example of the reach you got and clearly, how striking the story is. What was it about Penske Media that first got your attention?
Thank you. And the responses have been overwhelming. What first happened was Rolling Stone had their top 20 films of 2025, and Sinners was not on that list. So I saw someone in the comments who were kind of like, well, this makes sense that they were snubbed because Variety, who also has the same owner, also snubbed Sinners. And I was like, wait, really? I didn't know that. And that's kind of what started me down this rabbit hole.
Yeah, and I should say, I do think the critics at Variety and Rolling Stone have a mind of their own, but that is a concerning pattern that created a lot of backlash. But Jarrod, look, when we look at what we're looking at in terms of Penske's ownership over media, influential media, but also then the Golden Globes. Let's use those Golden Globe awards as a case study for the concerns we're talking about, right? How did the concerns that you and I are addressing here about PMC, how did they actually show up at this year's Golden Globes?
Sure. So the first thing that kind of comes to mind was that when Penske and Co. kind of came in, they applied to transition the Golden Globes from a nonprofit to a for-profit business. That's a pretty substantial undertaking because now the goals of the Golden Globes have changed from just kind of providing entertainment service to actually maximizing profit. And we've seen this with some of their partners that they had. If you watched the most recent Golden Globes, you saw that they had a deep integration partner with Polymarket, which is a marketplace for making predictions on a variety of things, not just sports, but it could be who's going to win Golden Globe for Best Podcast, right? And in addition to having a physical activation, they were on screen showing real-time data and metrics about how these predictions are playing out, and this is actually attached to real money. And so that was kind of like the first thing that kind of stood out to me is there's clearly a changing of the guard here. And the second thing, which is kind of closely related to that, is the addition of the new podcast, best podcast category. As Teri mentioned, this is really another play for adding more for your consideration dollars because these podcasters were making these huge pitches in the trade publications like Variety. Even Ben Shapiro did a New York Times activation trying to get his podcast to be considered for the best podcast category. And again, this is big business.
Yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing about the podcast category is in terms of how it was handled is that voters got to pick from a short list, and that short list was compiled by the company that Teri mentioned earlier, Luminate, which is owned by Penske. And that short list didn't necessarily appear like it was a rigorous search for the best podcast, but the most popular podcast that could possibly afford those for your consideration ads. So going back to everything we're talking about here, Teri, look, there are probably a lot of film, TV, music fans who are listening to this conversation and thinking, why should I care about any of this? Why does this matter to me? So what would you say to them?
Well, I think that this is something that we bump up next to often in our business, I think, is people looking at entertainment journalism as fluff or not mattering or what is the relevance of it? And I think that we need to change the dialogue to being about pop culture. This is talking about the movies and the art that are rising above. This is talking about how they're doing it and why they're doing it. I mean, pop culture is relevant and the analysis of it is relevant to who we are as a community, to who we are as a world, to who we are as a nation. And I think that when you have one company with one philosophy and one ideology as this monolith, as this juggernaut, we have a problem.
Well, one problem that a lot of us actually have when it comes to this juggernaut is look, we are entertainment journalists. right? And we make a living covering film, TV, and music. And so, you got to ask yourselves, like, how could Penske Media's growing dominance and control affect the work that we do as these types of entertainment reporters? So, Jarrod, I mean, what do you think about that insularity and the kind of the influence Penske Media would have on even the people that would cover them?
I think that moving forward, we're going to see a focus more on quantitative reporting in this industry as opposed to qualitative. Because right now, on the qualitative side, you can kind of insert a lot of bias into how you report. For example, you can focus on box office instead of production costs. You can, or vice versa. We saw that a lot with how Variety covered Sinners versus Marty Supreme. So with Marty Supreme, they really wanted to focus on the box office narratives. Like, look how much money they made just over the weekend. They just became the A24's highest grossing film domestically at hitting $80 million over Everything Everywhere All at Once. But they didn't tell the story that, one is a $70 million film, one is a $25 million film, right? So like those things matter. And conversely with Sinners, the narrative was, don't worry about how much they've done in the box office. Let's focus on how expensive it was as a film. It was $70 million, right? And so I think for entertainment journalists who are really going to be the most trusted in the industry are going to be people who are going to tell the whole story. To like, look, this is how much a film costs to make. This is how much this is how much it brought in, and they're really going to be telling the whole story for people to kind of make a determination for themselves whether something was truly successful or was a flop.
Yeah. And I should say that it's like, in terms of kind of the criticism of Penske, you'll notice that there's only one outlet that actually reported on Penske, which is The Ankler, which is it's a newsletter published by a former entertainment journalist, like an entertainment journalist who no longer writes for legacy magazines. Again, maybe that's because a lot of entertainment journalists, if they have any interest in self-preservation, they don't necessarily want to criticize the corporation where they may seek further opportunity down the road. But we have no interest in self-preservation here. Am I right, guys?
Obviously
not. But listen, thank you both so much for bringing this conversation to us. It's been extremely fascinating, something we're going to continue to follow.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rad.
Thanks, Rad.
Jarrod Jenkins is a fashion and pop culture columnist who's based in LA. Teri Hart is an entertainment reporter for Super Channel and the host of the Heart of It All podcast and, of course, the Commotion regular. She is in Toronto. I'm Radheyan Simonpillai, sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion.